What's up everybody, welcome back. So in this video we're going to take a look at setting up crouching, and I also want to move over the basic Foot-IK from a default third person template. And there's a few small fixes somebody in the Discord mentioned that I also want to take a look at. So that's what's up for today's video. If you like the series, please consider leaving a like, and if you want to get your hands on the project files, you can become a member of the YouTube channel or join my Patreon, and then you will get access to premium channels in the Discord files, and there's also project files for this project in there. So with all of that stuff out of the way, let's start today's video. So as I mentioned, somebody in the Discord mentioned some bugs, and we're gonna fix those first. So first of all, in our hero base character, if we're playing team deathmatch, we're setting up the team colors, and because we have different stats for each character, if you're in the wrong team, you will get less health than another team, for example. So we're going to bypass the character stats in the construction script of the hero base character. So go in your construction script, and then after the has authority node, we simply want to check which game mode we're playing. And because we are the server, we can simply access our game mode. So we're going to get the game mode, and then we need to cast it to our shooter game mode, because we're actually in game. So cast to shooter game mode. And then from the shooter game mode, we can get the current game mode that we're playing. So we can simply get the game mode from the variables, and we can use it to switch on the current game mode. So let's grab a switch in here. And then if we are playing endless wave or free for all, we're simply going to connect it back up to the data table row. And if we're playing team deathmatch, then we can grab these variables over here and simply set them by hand to the defaults. So we're going to set each of them to 100, for example. And now each team will have the same health and strength and stamina values. So compile and save, and that will take care of the first issue. Then we're going to go into the menu game mode, because if we are playing team deathmatch again and we set the maximum team size to 2 players, for example, if the third player enters the lobby, he can still access the first team as the third player. So that's not how we want it to be. So if we're going to the menu game mode, then we actually want to go inside of the event graph, and over here we have our event handle starting new player. So if we go all the way to the end over here, we can simply add a switch on game mode again, and then we can make sure that the team IDs are correct. So we can grab the selected game mode from the variables, and we're going to switch on the game modes again. Plug it in at the end of the event handle starting new player. So for endless wave and free for all, there's nothing we need to do. And if we're playing team deathmatch, then we can simply call our check team IDs function. So we can plug it into the switch, and this will take care of dividing players correctly among the teams. So compile and save it, and that should fix the lobby issue. And then there's one thing inside of the lobby menu widget I want to take a look at. So go to widgets and then lobby menu. So over here, if we go into the game mode options, if we are the server and the clients do not have the ready up button pressed, if we click our accept button over here, our start game button will be enabled regardless of the ready up settings of the clients. So we need to fix that. So we're going to go into the graph, and we're going to look for the button accept for the game mode, so we can go to the on-clicked event. So button game mode accept, and then view the on-clicked event. So over here at the end, we want to make a small change, and we can simply call our function that takes care of the ready up button. So we have our update players ready function. So if we drag it in and connect it to the end of the on-clicked event for the button, and all we need to do here is plug in the array with the players ready. So that's all players ready. Simply grab it from the variables and plug it in here. So that will take care of the ready up button in the lobby as well. Close it down. And now we're finally ready to start setting up our crouching. So let's start by setting up the input event. So we're going to go to Edit, Project Settings, and then we're going to add a new input. So this is 5.0. If you're using 5.1, you need to create a new input action. So we're going to add a new action mapping in here, and we're going to call this crouch. And then I'm going to use my left control. There we go. So we have the input set up. So for 5.1, you can right click, and then there is an option here for input, and then you can select input action. You want to create a new input action. Make sure it's a digital bool, and then you can add that to your mapping context, and it will provide you with a key you can enter in the mapping context. So that's how you set it up in 5.1. Then we also need montages to play. So we have a crouch entry and a crouch exit montage. So if we go to the Mannequin animation folder, we can simply look for the crouch animations in here, and we need to turn them into a montage. So we have the crouch entry and the crouch exit. So I'm simply gonna use the pistol ones, and we're gonna blend in the upper body, so that doesn't really matter. So select both of them and then create a new animation montage. And by default, those should have the default group and the default slot selected. So that's good. You want to make sure you have them set up like that. And we can close those down as well. And we're ready to start setting up the character. So let's open up our hero base, and we want to go into the event graph, and we need a little bit of room over here. So first of all, let's grab our input event for crouching. So let's grab input crouch. That's an action event. And we need some multicast events because we want to play a montage. So let's create some custom events first. We're going to create a few. So custom event, the first one is server start crouch. So this one needs to be replicated to run on server. Then we're also going to do a server stop crouch. So create another custom event and call this one server stop crouch. And again, this one is replicated to run on the server. And then we need the multicast events. So create another custom event, and that's multicast start crouch. So this one replicated as a multicast, and then the last one for now is a custom event, and this is multicast stop crouch. And this also needs to be a multicast. So let's move these ones to the side for now. We already have a boolean in here that tells us if we are moving or not, and we're going to use that one. So if we are moving, I don't want to use the crouch entry and exit montages. We're simply going to blend between our crouching and normal movement. And if we're standing still, we're going to use the montages. So that's why I'm using the isMoving boolean in here. And we also need a hasAuthority switch. So let's start with the input event, and we're going to grab a hasAuthority. So if we are the server, we can directly call our multicast start crouch event. So do multicast start crouch for hasAuthority. And if we are a client, we want to call the server version. So we're going to call server start crouch. Now we need to pass on this boolean. So we need to make sure that we actually have it as an input over here. So let's create an input for all of the events and call this one isMoving. So that's a boolean, and we need them on the server events and on the multicasts. So let's make sure you add them to all of them. And we need to plug them in over here. And then we want to do the same thing for releasing the button. So we're going to grab a hasAuthority switch again, plug it in over here. And in this case, we're going to call our stop crouching. So multicast stop crouch for the server. And then for the clients, we're going to call server stop crouch. So again, plug in the booleans. And those should be our multicast events. So if we grab our server events and move them over here, So all we want to do for these ones is simply call the multicast versions. So multicast start crouch and pass on the boolean. And then for the stop crouch, we're going to call multicast stop crouch. And again, pass on the boolean. And for the multicast events, we actually want to set up our crouching. So let's move start crouch over here first. And we're going to grab a branch. So we can use our isMoving boolean. And to make sure that we do not have any foot sliding while playing our entry and exit montages, I'm gonna set the maximum move speed to 0 while we're playing the montage. So if you don't want that, then you do not need to set the move speed over here, but then you're gonna get some foot sliding during the entry and exit montage. So it's up to you which one you want. So for now, I'm going to grab my character movement component, drag it in here, and I'm going to set the maximum walk speed. So if we are not moving, I want to plug this one into the false pin. We're going to set the maximum move speed to 0, and then we're going to play a montage. And we want to plug in our character mesh over here as the skeletal mesh component, and we want to play our crouch entry montage. So crouch entry. And then if we are actually moving, then we're gonna set the character movement speed to our maximum walk speed crouched. So we're gonna plug this one into the true pin, and then we're gonna drag off the character movement again, and we can get the maximum walk speed crouched. And simply plug it in over here. So if we have the character movement selected over here, we can define our crouched move speed over here. So you can set it. Default is the maximum walk speed 600 and crouching 300. So we're simply going to use that for now, but you can adjust it if you want. Then I'm going to use a boolean of myself to define if I'm crouching. So by default you have the character movement and there's also crouching in here. So if you want to use that, you need to make sure that you enable can crouch over here. But I find this kind of annoying to use because it doesn't interpolate the capsule height. So you need to mess around and make sure that this one actually matches up with your animation blueprint. Otherwise, you're going to get hiccups between the height of your capsule, and I'm not really understanding how it works, I guess, but I'm working around it by just using my own custom boolean. So I'm going to create a boolean and call this one isCrouched or isCrouching. And we're going to set it over here. So if we are actually moving, then we can simply set our isCrouching boolean and we can use this to blend to our crouching move state. And then if we are blending out our montage, then we're also going to set the isCrouching boolean. So plug this one into onBlendOut. And after this is done, we want to set our maximum walk speed back to the default one. So we're going to grab character move speed set maximum walk speed and paste it over here. And then we want to make sure that we have a variable where we can store the default value. So let's promote it to a variable and call this one something like maximum walk speed default. And I'm actually, so we do need this variable, but we don't want to plug it in over here because this is the crouch entry montage. So over here, we want to use the maximum walk speed crouched. So we can use that one from the character movement component and plug it in after the montage as well. And then let me see, we're going to use a timeline to actually shrink down our capsule. So let's right click and make a new timeline. And we're going to call this our crouch timeline. Let's open it up. And let's set the timeline up first. So I'm going to make this a pretty short one again. First we need a float track. Let's call this something like the crouch lerp. And then I'm going to set it to a length of 0.15 seconds. And let's add 2 keyframes. So right click, add key to curve float. And then you can simply select the first key and I'm going to set it to value 0, 0. so time 0, value 0. And then the second one is time 0.15 and then value 1. So that's our entire timeline. And we don't need to set any other settings, so we can compile it and then go back to our event graph. So over here we have the timeline in place, and we want to make sure that for the montage we grab the actual upper pin, so we immediately start executing the timeline, plug it into the play pin. And for the is crouching is true from the is moving branch, we also want to plug it into the play pin over here. Then we're going to use a lerp again, so we need variables for our capsule height. So let's create 2 new floats. The first one is the capsule height. So that's the normal height. And then let's duplicate it, and that's capsule height crouched. So the default one, you can have a look at the capsule component over here. Capsule half height, so that's 88. So let's compile and make sure that we have our default value over here set to 88. And then for the crouched height, I'm going to use something like 70. Let me double check. Yeah, so I have it set at 70. So the crouch animation isn't really that low. So you don't want to actually use the half of the height, but I think 70 is kind of close to the actual height of the character crouching. So then we can use the update pin over here. We can drag in our capsule component and simply set the capsule height or the half height. Plug it into the update pin, and we're going to use a lerp. So let's drag off the value from the timeline and look for lerp float. So this is actually the alpha, and then in the A pin we want to plug in the capsule height, and in the B pin the capsule height crouched. And the return value goes into the set capsule height node over here. So this should look like this. And now we have our crouch entry done. And we need to do kind of the same thing in reverse for stop crouching. So we're going to grab our stop crouch, and we can pretty much, well, let's just set it up. So we're going to grab a branch over here, plug it in. And if this branch is true, then we want to set our maximum walk speed to our default walk speed. So let's grab character movement, set max walk speed, plug it into the true pin. And then grab the default speed from the variables, plug it in over here. Make sure that you actually set the default speed over here as well. So that's 600. Compile and save. And then after this, we want to make sure that we have is crouching and set it back to false. And then we can simply plug this into the timeline into the reverse pin. So this will make the timeline play reversed from the current position. And then if we are actually standing still, we need to make sure that we play our crouching animation. So let's grab these nodes. First, we're going to make sure that we can't move during the actual montage. So maximum walk speed 0. Then we need to play our crouch exit montage. So for the upper pin, we actually want to immediately execute the timeline. So we're going to connect that to our reverse pin. And then if we are blending out, we want to set the is crouching bool and the maximum walk speed again. So let's copy those, connect them to on blend out. This time is crouching is false. And for the move speed, we want to plug in our default again. There we go. So this should take care of the crouching setup on the character. And now we need to make sure that we actually set up our BlendSpace, and we also need some turn in place animations for crouching. So one small thing I want to mention before we start setting up the animations. So over here we're using multicast events, and in the multicast events we're setting the crouching boolean. So we don't need to set this to replicate. Each instance of our character will have the correct boolean set, and because each instance will have their own animation blueprint, all of the animation blueprints will also have the correct is crouching boolean if we access it. So just a little side note over here. So as I mentioned, we need to set up a BlendSpace and we need turn in place animations. So let's start with the BlendSpace. Let's right click and go to animation, create a new BlendSpace. So we need to select our character, and that's our SK Mannequin. So that's from Game Characters Heroes folder. And then this is going to be our BlendSpace Quinn Crouched, for example. And let's set it up. So for the horizontal axis, we're going to set up the direction. And that's going to be from -180 to 180. And then for the smoothing time, we're going to set 0.2 seconds. Then vertical axis is going to be speed. And that's going from 0 to 300, because that's the maximum crouched walk speed. And then again, smoothing time 0.2. So we can simply drop in our crouching animations. So let's look for crouch. And there's a bunch of them. So all of them are for the male character, so it doesn't really matter which one you pick. So these are aim offsets. So I'm gonna use the pistol ones, for example. And we need an idle one. So let's look for pistol crouched idle over here. And we're gonna drag that into the bottom row. So we're gonna use idle for each of the locations on the grid. So I'm gonna drag it in 5 times. And simply make sure they're all the way down, so the value for speed is 0. And then we want to grab our crouch walk forward and drag it in all the way at the top over here. Then we have crouch walk backward, and we're going to move that all the way to the right, so direction direction 180, and we're going to do it again at the other side, so that's -180. And then we have walk left, so that goes on the left side over here, where the direction is -90. And then for the walk right, we're going to plug it in over here, so direction 90. So this should be our BlendSpace for crouching. So again, it's probably not perfect, but just as a quick setup. Save it and close it down. And we need our crouching montages. So if we go to the locomotion folder, we can look for crouch. And there should be turn in place ones over here. So maybe it's easier to look for turn. So these are the normal ones. And then over here we have pistol crouch, turn left, 90, 180 and right 90, 180. So we're gonna use the ones for 90 right and then 90 left, and we're also gonna use 180 right. So since it doesn't really matter which side we're turning, and the other standing montage for turning left 180 didn't have working root motion. So that's why we're not using that one. Excuse me. So with these 3 selected, right click and create a new animation montage. And again, these need to be set up for the default slot, so that should work. Let's make sure we have the montages saved as well. So let's open up the animation blueprint, and in here let's start in the event graph. So all we need to do in here is grab the is crouching boolean from the character. So let's get is crouching. So make sure you grab the variable that we created ourselves and not the one from the character movement component. So the one I created is crouching. So grab this one and we can promote it to a variable on the animation blueprint. So is crouching. I didn't spell that correctly, but that happens all the time. So we're just gonna ignore that. And now we can plug it in somewhere in between. It doesn't really matter as long as you set it. So we have is crouching in place over here, and we can go into the animation graph to set up our new blend space. And we're going to use a blend pose by bool. So if we go over here, let's make a little bit of room. So this is the start of the animation graph, and over here we're actually playing our normal blend space. So let's disconnect it, and then we're going to drag off here and use a blend pose by bool. So blend by bool. And use this one. So the true pose is the old pose that we had, and then we can plug in our is crouching. So our true pose is not the old pose we had, because if we are crouching, we're actually need to use the new blend space. So let's move this one to the false pin, and then for the new one we can drag in our new crouched blend space. So we're going to plug this one into the true pin, and we can simply plug in the direction and the speed from the variables. Then we need to plug this one back into the slot node. That should work fine. And the only thing I want to do is make sure that we change the blend time depending on if we're moving or not. So I'm going to select a float. So let's right click and do select float. And then for the condition, I'm actually going to grab the speed from the variables in here and make sure that it's greater than 0. Plug it in over here. So if my speed is greater than 0, I want to use a blend time of 0.2. And if I'm actually standing still, I want to use a blend time of 0. And then we can plug this one into both of the blend times, and that should pick the correct float. So this should take care of our animation graph, and now all we need to do is set up our play turning montage. So let's go into the play turn montage function, not an event, it's a function. I always mess those up. And then in here, before we set the local play turn montage, we can simply add a branch and check if we are crouching. So let's grab a branch and grab our is crouching boolean. So if we're not crouching, plug in the old value, and if we are crouching, we need to plug in the correct crouched montage. So this one was the turn right 180. So we need to make sure that we look for turning, and then we're going to look for a montage. So we have crouched turn right 180. So we need to plug this one in here. That's correct. And then make sure we continue execution like we do with the other node. So we can simply copy this stuff and we can paste it over here again. Move over the pins. So if we are not crouching, we're going to use the animation we already had in here, and that was our turn right 90. So over here we want to set turn right 90 and make sure, oh, this actually doesn't work. So that's always a mistake. If I select it in here and I click the little arrow, I think it's going to put it in here, but you actually need to select it in the content browser to make that work. So that's a mess up. So over here I need to look for the turn, and then we need turning crouched right 90. So that's this one. And over here we actually need to select our turn 180, and that's also the crouched. So make sure we plug in this execution pin, and let's paste this stuff down here for the last time. Move over the pins. So if it's false, we're going to use what we did, and that's left 90 if it's correct, and it is. So this needs to be turn 90 and then crouched left. And make sure that we connect this pin as well. Okay, so this should make the crouching work. So let's compile and save, and let's have a little look in game. So let's start with a solo game, why not? So I'm gonna move, and then if I press crouch, it's going to blend to my crouching state, so that's working. And if I'm standing still, I'm actually using the crouch entry and crouch exit montage, as you can see. So that looks a little bit better, and he actually crouches deeper, and then when you start moving he's raising again. So that's why I mentioned the 70 height for the capsule height would be pretty good. And if we are crouched, we should have crouching turn in place animations, so that's working as well. So our crouching is set up and good to go, but now as you can see our feet are clipping into the ground. And there is a pretty easy way to fix that if you are using the Mannequin. So we can simply grab the Foot-IK from a default third-person template and we can paste it in here basically. So that's what we're going to do next, and then we're going to wrap it up for today. So as I mentioned, we can simply grab the Foot-IK from a default template. So let's make sure that you open up one in the same engine version as you're making the shooter project. And then in here, so over here for example, this is a default project with just one asset pack added, but there's nothing else in here. So you want to go to the character folder, then go to mannequins and then go to rigs. And in here you want to grab the CR Mannequin Basic Foot-IK. Simply right click this one and we're going to go to Asset Actions and then Migrate. So it wants to migrate a bunch of other stuff, but we're simply going to disable that. So for controls you can just disable everything. And then let's see, we actually don't need all of this stuff. So you can disable heroes and then you can disable, let's see, we do need to keep this rigs folder, so we want to disable functions, we want to disable instances, we want to disable the mannequin over here, disable meshes. So for the rigs, we're going to keep the Mannequin Basic Foot-IK and disable all of the other stuff. And then poses, simply disable that, textures, get rid of it. So in the end, all we have is this file. Click OK, then go to the correct project. So let me double check. I need to enter it over here into the content folder. And it's migrated successfully. So go back into your project and then it should be in the Mannequin folder. And then we have the rig folder, and in here... oh no, it's another folder actually, so it's called Mannequins with an S behind it, and then there's rigs, and there is the basic Foot-IK, so it actually did migrate it. So now it's really simple to add. We can simply go to our animation blueprint, go to the animation graph, and we're going to go all the way to the end. So right before the output pose, let's make a little bit of room, and we can simply drag off here and type control rig. So use the control rig node over here, plug this one into the result, and then on the right side over here we can use the control rig class. So let's set up our Mannequin Basic Foot-IK, and then we should get a boolean in here. So if we compile it, no, that doesn't work. Oh, we need to make sure that over here on the right side we have the input should do IK trace, so we want to use this as a pin. So let's enable use pin over here, and then we can simply grab our isFalling boolean. So drag your isFalling boolean in here and make sure you swap it around using a not bool, and then plug it into the condition. So this way, if we are jumping or falling, it doesn't try to put the foot on the ground. So right now, if we compile and save, this should make the Foot-IK work. And now let's also make sure we test in multiplayer to see if the crouching is replicated. So let's grab a 2-player game. Oh, I'm not, oh really, there we go. Joining it, and we should be good to go. So ready up and launch it. So first of all, let's have a look at the Foot-IK. So right now, if I'm crouching, you can see the feet are actually nicely on the ground as they should. So the actual blend space is a little bit twitchy, but I think I know how we can fix that. And as for the replication of the crouching, that seems to be working. So let's switch to the host. And if the host is crouching, that's also working. And my turn in place animations are also replicating. And my Foot-IK is replicating. So all of that stuff looks pretty good. So I think if we want to go, oh really? So this is nothing to worry about. This is just Unreal being Unreal. So if we want to look at our blend space, so if we go into our crouching blend space, then there is a setting over here called the sample smoothing with the weight speed. And I think if we look at the movement blend space, so over here we actually use a weight speed, so we might want to try if that smooths out the actual crouching blend space. So let's set the weight speed to something like 3, save it, and then that should work a little bit better. So I quickly set up the game and we're gonna check it out. So as you can see right now, if I'm using my crouched blend space and I'm walking backwards and moving around a bit, it's not as twitchy anymore. So that took care of the animation part. So we should have crouching fixed up and we have our Foot-IK in place as well. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like. In the next episode we're gonna set up melee, and then in the episode after that we're gonna add grenades with path prediction. So thanks for watching. Talk to you later guys. Bye bye.